Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and if you would like to keep up with all things Clown Decade, do subscribe to the channel and of course become a member. But today I've got a big stream tonight with Laughing at the Guardian, so let's just get right into this. The leftists want a big old wealth tax. It is a tax that has never worked. Find me any example where it has worked and we can talk. But any leftist who's coming in thinking that I'm going to be in any way pro-tax, this is not the video for that. I'm instead, once again, looking at the people that know how to create wealth, telling people how not to tax them. Because at the end of the day, everyone understands that they do have to pay tax. People just do not want to have the mickey taken out of them. Anyway, let's look at what Politics Joe had to ask.
Many groups that don't like landlords say, well, you're a parasite. I mean, you see this regularly. You get a lot of abusive comments when you're a landlord.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing with landlords. In my experience, they've been pretty good, but obviously you hear the horror stories, and all everyone talks about on the internet is obviously the horror stories. So naturally they get a bad name, but in fact the proportion of private renters has been quite low. Obviously it went up a bit in the 21st century to about 20% of all market share, and thankfully it's above social housing as well. Obviously that started to go down in the 80s when home ownership went up. But there is actually an argument to be made that the less landlords you have, the higher housing prices are, and that kind of makes sense, not because it's causal or anything like that, but because it means that there's a wealth of housing where landlords can actually invest and obviously give an option to plenty of renters, because buying a house isn't for everyone. People who move to London, doesn't make sense to buy a house because they all plan to move out in 5 years.
But if you penalise the people who are going to give them the jobs, guess what happens? The jobs disappear.
Well, I mean, yeah, we've already started taxing more on businesses with national insurance contributions, among others, and unemployment went up under Labour, because unemployment always goes up under Labour because of the same things.
I wouldn't recommend my kids to go into property investing at all.
I mean, there probably is a bit of a market crash coming at some point with housing, but to be honest with you, from what I can tell, the main reason to actually buy a house for yourself anyway is effectively to save up for a deposit for a bigger house when you have a higher salary as well. Investing in it at the moment, probably not a good idea. You know, buy the dip. When's that happening? No idea, but there's no way that the housing market's going to stay as it is forever. It's just not possible. Anyway, the first question is effectively how big's your portfolio, who you're representing, things like that, and these people are landlords and own multiple homes, some even above 70, and this is basically front-loaded to effectively rile up the audience. Look at these people, they're hoarding housing, as if just sitting on a house and not actually getting the passive income from renters is in any way a viable way to get into property investment. It's nonsense, obviously.
Is being a landlord a hard job?
Oh, yes. And the thing is that many groups that don't like landlords say, well, you're a parasite. I mean, you see this regularly. You get a lot of abusive comments when you're a landlord. You're a parasite, you're just sitting there taking money, as if there's nothing involved in being a landlord. You just sit there, collect the money. But of course it's not like that at all. You've got huge responsibilities, you've got huge regulations, and after the Renters' Rights Bill comes in, you know, you're going to have an enormous number of things to think about. So it is very hard work.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm aware of the horror stories that everyone talks about, but really, what a landlord's job is, keep the house fairly livable, or the apartment, whatever, actually provide what you are supposed to provide in the contract, electricity, water, sinks, ovens, things like that. Any of that goes wrong, it's your responsibility to fix it as quickly as possible. If you don't, you can be taken to court. Most of the work in landlordism is following regulations, and even before you had the regulations back in, you know, the Victorian period and what have you, there'd still be a responsibility there because it was a lot more free market and, well, people could obviously move house. But that rarely happened because obviously you had more of a high trust society back then, and obviously compassion alone would have been enough to keep most housing in a pretty decent state. Obviously when it came to the slums, different story, but well, slums are a little bit rarer these days, I'll say.
And that's why, as I say, if it's made so hard there's no profit in it, well, you know, people are just going to leave.
To which a lot of the leftist reaction is naturally, oh, that's good, that means more houses to be freed up. What actually tends to happen instead is that it's just brought up by a different property manager and it's a property manager that effectively tries to circumvent the law in any way that he can, because this will be the type of person that can avoid fines, or would rather pay fines than pay the money to actually get the housing into a decent state. And even failing that, I mean, honestly, do you really think that if you can't afford a deposit now, you're going to afford it if house prices come down by 5%? We're quite a way off that. Leftists don't seem to understand that actually to afford a house, you actually do need to save and do have a decent enough salary to pay for it. Okay, it's basically impossible in London, unless you have incredibly nice parents, of course. So then you need to get, obviously, out to the commuter belt, and, well, then your transport costs become a massive issue. It's it's kind of a lose-lose-lose around London, which is where most people complain about renting anyway. Which makes sense, because at least 1 in 15 people is an illegal migrant, according to Thames Water research.
Lord Kinnock suggested we introduce a wealth tax as a means to raise funds to kind of attack all the problems that we have in this country. How would you feel about a wealth tax being introduced?
Depends if you're wealthy. I don't know.
If it's based on capital values, how would people pay it? Because they might be property comfortable, but not in a position to be liquid.
Yeah, and this is largely why wealth taxes just do not work around the world, because effectively it forces some of the most productive in society to effectively stop being productive, because it's not liquid. You have to obviously pay the tax at some point. Sometimes you'll have to take out a large loan for it. Other times, because it's not liquid, it takes years to actually get rid of the wealth, and then if it takes years, you owe even more money on the wealth tax. And the other problem with that is, if you are selling up stocks for a business and things like that, you have to pay capital gains on top of it. It never worked for this reason. Pretty much every country that's tried it gave up on it after a couple of years because it was just so dreadful. And yet here we are in Britain yet again with a Labour Party that has MPs saying, why do you need to raise tax? We're spending $5 billion more. Going down the student politics green route of just put a wealth tax on. It's absolutely dead-brained. There's no thought behind it. It's literally nothing more than just revenge. And the problem is that polling shows that a lot of Britain actually agrees with it. They don't really care if it brings in money or not. They just want to effectively punish the rich, and that's because for, pretty much my entire lifetime, I've only seen the communist meme of the wealthy ever be applied in media, and that's how basically everyone thinks that every rich person's Mr. Burns, and they want revenge on that. It's genuinely maddening, and people will literally destroy the country because they can't tell the difference between a reality and a TV show. That's it.
The ones that have got yachts, they can sail out of here tomorrow. You won't see them again, and you won't get any tax off them. So you've got to, I think the government needs to wake up and smell the coffee. And that is, if you penalise people too much tax-wise, they're the ones that create wealth. And if you get rid of them and they're leaving in droves, I've got a number of friends of mine who have left the country. I'm not going to, but they have. Then you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, we've had 2 months of contraction, by the way. 0.3 down last month, 0.1 down... No, sorry, 2 months ago. 0.1 down last month. And again, these are OBR figures. They're probably going to be revised down. There's constant news stories as well that the current estimates for the number of rich people leaving is 16,500, something like that, way beyond the estimated amounts that need to leave for the non-dom changes to actually cost the Treasury money. So, again, laugh a curve. You've ended up changing tax that in theory should just bring more tax in, and it actually costs you instead. Exact same thing probably going to happen with the wealth tax. And obviously this is why Reform keep going on about their tax changes being involved to get the wealthy back, because it's not just wealthy foreigners that are doing this, it's wealthy Brits too. There are wealthy Brits that have moved to Dubai, Australia, Ireland as well as another one. It's not just wealthy foreigners that are going, so even if you've got the low IQ or wealthy foreigners are a problem opinion, yeah, it's the incredibly successful, talented natives going too, I'm afraid.
Would you support a wealth tax?
Well, I do actually, because it's not like we are in the Arabian Gulf where the sources of oils that you don't have to work hard. I mean, it got to be something that to be organized, and I trust in the government. They find the best way to look after the interests of the people of the UK.
I don't really get that reasoning, to be honest. I support a wealth tax because there's not oil like the Gulf states. I mean, On top of that, there is oil. We're just not hoovering it up because we have absolutely mad net zero targets. But it's entirely possible that this is just a completely apolitical guy. Yeah, I trust the government to do what's best in the British people's interest. Nobody who's been paying attention, even for the last 2 years, let alone the last 2 decades, would say this. No one would.
I've seen reporting that the number of millionaires, the millionaire exodus, as people are talking about, is vastly over-exaggerated, and close to 0% are actually leaving.
This is largely because of the definition of millionaire tends to change. Effectively, because pretty much everyone who bought property before 1990 has ended up with a house that costs millions in, say, places like London and Surrey. You've ended up with an inflated millionaire figure. The thing is that these are the type of people who just happen to own a house, and therefore the only real tax intake you get from them is council tax. They're not the type to pay capital gains. They're not the type to pay large business rates necessarily, because they either work for a living or they own a small business. When you talk about the proper money makers, who, according to research that I have seen and covered in a video before, those say affected by the non-doms, they tend to pay 81 times more than the median earner in income tax and something like 41 times more than the average person in capital gains. They are absolute pay pigs, and they are the ones that matter and the ones that are leaving. It's quite funny because, you know, the leftists are the type to go on about the 1% having 90% of wealth or something like that. It's not actually close to that. But either way, 1% of your millionaires leaving, if they are massively concentrated in the top end of those millionaires, that's still people with the most wealth who are leaving. You don't want those cash cows to go because you end up poor as a country. It's obviously a large part as to why GDP has been dropping for the past 2 months. It's obvious there's a causation there.
Because obviously it's very difficult to leave this country. It's very difficult. Like, why would someone want to leave if they have their entire social life here, the business interests are here?
Well, I mean, as this guy said before, he's not going to be one leaving, but he knows plenty of his own friends who have left. And the reason is because the world's incredibly mobile. You can set up businesses in other countries quite easily. You can keep in contact with your other millionaire friends because plane flights are relatively cheap these days. And even if you can't get a plane over to see your friends, obviously you have options like Zoom and all that, which obviously isn't quite the same, but to be honest, these people are good at networking anyway. They are relatively social people, so they'll be happy just making new friends anyway. It doesn't particularly matter if, by technical definitions, a millionaire, it's only 0.7% of them leaving. 16,500 of them left. You know, we had something like 140,000 non-doms in 2005. That went down to about 75,000 last year. You get another 15,000 or more of them leaving. It's obviously dire. Terrible things are happening. And using lies, damn lies and statistics, you're trying to pretend that the country is not currently going beyond stagnation to actual contraction. And you're pretending that this has nothing to do with it too. It's just crazy.
What the mistake that I think the Labour Party are doing at the moment is this. They think the people leaving are all billionaires. Now, the billionaires, let's be honest, they've got so much money, they can do what they want, go where they want.
Yes, and on top of that, not only do they help out with the economy in general, but they are a massive, massive, massive tax revenue cow for the Treasury. So, you know, getting rid of them, throwing them out, incentivising them to leave, what have you, it's going to hurt the economy and massively the tax take as well. Obviously, that's going to happen. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because he moved straight on to the next point.
But what's happening is genuine people who have made a few £1 million have decided, you know what, I'm not staying here. Not with inheritance tax at 40%, not with this, not with that, not the state of the country at the moment. They don't want to stay. And that's the problem, because those people probably spend 100,000 a year within the economy on dinners and paying for, you know, their homes being refurbished and everything else.
Yeah, and this is the big ticker. Billionaires, doesn't take much for them to be pushed out, especially if they're foreign, obviously. But millionaires within Britain, a lot of whom will not be foreign, they're thinking of moving to Australia, to Ireland, to anywhere else, really. You know, people my age who aren't millionaires by any stretch of the imagination have wanted to move for some time. No, there's barely anybody, not even in Politics Joe, who thinks the country is going in the right direction. And a large part of it, they may not realise, in fact they definitely don't realise this, but because we've effectively had the idea of punish the rich, punish business for at least a decade. It's led obviously to businesses stagnating, loads closing down. Hell, my local fish and chip shop was closed when I went to pick up some chips yesterday. My local fish and chip shop closed. It was the only one in the town that actually opened more than 2 days a week, and it was always with a massive queue. And it closed. It's not Millionaires that own these local fish and chip shops, and it's just depressing for absolutely everyone to see one of their fish and chip shops that have been there in their village for years and years and years to close. Had a really good reputation as well. Honestly, it was seeing that effectively made me go, yeah, this is a massive recession indicator. It's going to be a really tough next few years. And obviously the millionaires who were more likely to actually be the business owners, they're thinking the same thing. Can't work here, can't run a business here, I'm trying it somewhere else.
Now, they're not multi-millionaires. They're decent people who have worked hard and made some money for themselves and for their family. And they're the ones that are being penalised, and they're the ones who are leaving. So it's not about the multi-millionaires. It genuinely is about people who have made a few million and want to stay in the country, but have decided for a number of reasons, tax being one of them, state of the economy and be another one, Labour Party being another one, they're leaving. And that is not good, Ed. It's not good for the UK.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, not even just millionaires are doing that. You know, you can say, oh, there's social reasons to stay here, but there's less and less and less to do so, especially when your friends are all leaving. You know, why don't you go with them? What you're going to end up having is literal diaspora societies within places like Australia, maybe Canada, Ireland as well, where effectively the English people have gone. And it'll be literally like little English towns in these admittedly already Anglophone countries, and you'll have literally little Britons throughout them if this continues for some time, which, to be honest with you, I think it's only going to last till the end of the decade.
It feels like that the tenants can sort of, basically tail wagging the dog, yeah. So whilst we get on very well with our tenants, the rent that we charge is less than market rent anyway. We trust them to look after our property. They trust us to be fair. But we feel that, that it is possible that the tenants can start to take advantage of us, and we're basically stuck.
Yeah, it seems to be the common left-wing assumption that basically anything that is there that supposedly helps the quote-unquote oppressed class, because at the end of the day they're all neo-Marxists, it can only be a good thing. But at the end of the day, the people who are providing goods and services, in this case housing, they're going to react to incentives. And obviously this is why communism and socialism never actually work. It's a very basic thing that obviously never dies, and it's because they have an excuse for every time it doesn't work. Or it wasn't real socialism, I'd do it much better. And obviously it's the Jordan Peterson thing of, well, you can't even keep your room clean, how do you expect to keep the country in order?
There's nothing that we could do if a tenant decides not to pay their rent. We could take out insurance. Again, that's an extra cost. And right now, the margin is narrow, really narrow. I wouldn't recommend my kids to go into property investing.
I mean, the other thing is that she has absolutely no plans to up the rent, and yet there will be plenty of people who say all landlords are scum and things like that. And this is the thing, the margin's narrow, that's because she's renting below market rate. She obviously doesn't want to up the rent anymore, because then that incentivises her tenants to use lawfare against her, and it's becoming less and less and less of a, I'm trying to find a word the opposite of risk, but I may as well just say more and more and more of a risk. As mentioned before, all this is going to do is reduce the amount of rented properties, and you know how many people can actually afford these houses. Because while it might make the house prices go down, the problem is that it's already something ridiculous, like 20 times that of the average annual wage. It's not that high, but you get the idea. All this change in the proportion of private landlords ends up doing is maybe reducing that to, I don't know, maybe 15 times instead. That's still basically impossible to get a mortgage off, especially for houses in London. And ultimately is also going to cause more expenses elsewhere in your life anyway, because the things that kept your other parts of your life cheap, food, luxuries, what have you, you have less business and less competition in the UK. Prices are going to go up because the supply's gone down. So it's a catch-22 anyway. So what do you do about housing? Well, number one, reduce the demand. get rid of a load of immigrants, many who shouldn't be here, stop allowing indefinite leave to remain, things like that, actually kick people out who are overstaying their visa, stop student fraud, things like that. Once that's all done, start building again. Or, just get rid of the Town and Countries Planning Act and reduce regulation. And then the market will decide if we actually need any more or not. I think we do, but, if it's all done under market conditions, whatever happens, happens. I'm fine with that.
With all the changes to tenants' right bills, I think it's making it harder for smaller landlords, even bigger landlords. You've got to weigh up all the costs and implications, sort of just listen to the guys in there from a perspective. So there's a lot of more documentation coming in, etc. And one thing they didn't really raise was the cost and the implications of all the stuff that you've got to do with ESG.
It's quite funny. One of my favourite people to listen to at the moment is someone called Rory Sutherland, who was a guy who was in marketing, and now he goes around effectively bringing wisdom from marketing into other areas of life, such as politics and things like that. And a point he made is that one reason that we were an incredibly efficient country, especially during the Industrial Revolution and beyond, is that we were a high-trust society, and because we were a high-trust society, effectively a handshake was good enough for both parties to know that each other would largely keep to an agreement. Whereas in low-trust societies, you need bureaucracy and a hell of a lot of police and lawyers and things like that to make sure that contracts are actually kept to. What's happened is that even during the time we were a high-trust society, this has happened basically since World War II, is we brought in a whole load of bureaucracy that's effectively been brought in as a purposeful inefficiency that's supposed to be for low trust societies when we never really were. But then we turn into a low trust society now, obviously, which, by the way, I do believe can be reversed. But this is just adding on top of that, this ESG stuff, even more documentation and bureaucracy. It's all there, and it's supposed to be used, in theory, to make sure that you are going by your agreement. The thing is with things like ESG, this is stuff that people only ever really agree to shut up the bureaucracy. But now it's got so out of hand that the bureaucracy's just grown to now dictate to landlords they need to follow ESG. Despite the fact that this also all costs more and will put rents up, but absolutely no one in politics, Joe, or their audience will realise that and just say the landlords are being greedy and don't want to work anymore. And then their rents will go up again and they'll just blame it on greedy landlords, when really, landlords don't have that larger margins.
So landlords that I speak to, obviously I work in the property industry as well, it's going to be harder and harder.
And this isn't just a problem with landlords. Pretty much every business owner is saying this. Hell, again, I hate to say it, but I know an awful lot of people who have either been made redundant, lost their jobs, etc., etc. And pretty much everyone knows what gets cited. Oh, it's these national insurance contribution increases, it's energy prices, etc., etc. You see it in the news all the time. And Labour's plan is basically make all these things worse at the moment. Just saying.
Is it not their turn to take a sharp shock? Young people have been putting up with a lot recently. And there's far more young people who have contributed almost 50% flat tax at this point.
Some young people should get off their arse and get a job, shouldn't they?
I mean, it's quite an unfortunate thing. Yes, I do agree with it to some extent. However, I've been crashing out in a few videos recently because of just how difficult it is to, climb the ladder, get a decent salary and actually start investing. So as Peter McCormack, who obviously runs an interview show on YouTube, his son says it pretty much every episode these days, but it feels really bad to actually have a job because you feel like you're playing the game properly and doing everything you were told to do to be successful in life, and yet you're being punished for it while you're seeing a bunch of immigrants come over, get a hotel for free, get private dental care, healthcare as well, while you're stuck with the bill. And then obviously there's the benefits thing. Obviously the news this week has been if you're on, incapacity, PIP and universal credit, you end up with a yearly salary of about $25,000, which is above minimum wage full time, by the way. So even just getting on that first step of the ladder, just any minimum wage job, it's not worth it. And you effectively have to incentivise these things rather than just having a go at them. Because I'll be honest, it took me till about 23 or 24 to properly get a graduate scheme job where there was a career path. Before that, I was just in a supermarket. And to be honest with you, young people have been absolutely smashed by the last 10 years, especially with COVID. It was a hell of a sacrifice to tell them you will have no social life in the most social parts of your life for a year and a half and 2 years to save granny. And then after that, basically, you're told your tax are going to increase year on year. It sucks. What really should be being said to them is stop being so left-wing, stop demanding more from the government, because the less the government is in your way, the better you can actually climb these ladders. But going into the detail of how all that works, they're just not up for listening to it, so effectively, you're just going to have to do it through force. And then they'll end up changing their minds once they see the fruits of such a world. Lee Anderson, actually, in an interview the other day, was saying that he was an anti-Thatcherite for years, until effectively started talking to working class people who said, effectively, thanks to Maggie Thatcher, I now own a house, partly through right to buy, partly through having better jobs, because obviously he was from a mining town that was devastated by it, and there were better ways to deal with that, sure. But the majority of the country and a lot of the working class effectively said, I got another job, I ended up doing quite well with it, and I ended up being able to actually afford a house that I was renting off the government or the council for years, and I am now going to die with something to my name rather than nothing, which is something my parents never had. But now we've got a load of young people who think my parents are going to be dead with an awful lot to their name, and I'm worried I will have basically nothing, even through inheritance, because that's being taxed massively, but they want massive inheritance taxes because they think it only affects the incredibly rich people, which isn't necessarily true. But I can understand effectively why to a lot of people, oh, isn't it the rich people's turn to take a shock because young people have for ages? I get why it just sounds like laziness, but in reality, everyone should just be taking less of a shock, but nobody wants to pay the price from central government cuts for that, because everyone's a communist.
They've all got jobs, and that's the point.
Well, if they've got jobs, that's very good.
I'm not talking about people who are unemployed. I'm talking about people who are graduates, who are who are in paying jobs who are paying 50% of their salary on rent. That's not particularly fair.
No.
Well, I kind of hate to say it, but it's either pay 50% on rent or don't live there. I know it sucks, and I know that it's not an economy that people think is particularly fair, but it's the position you're in. And I'm not being funny, but if you're blaming landlords for this, you have to look at the wider economy and supply and demand. People will complain about this and then never look at the demand side, with literally 4.5 million people crossing the border, legally I mean, I don't mean the illegals here, over the past 4 years or so. And, you know, I still get my left-wing friends saying, oh, you know, it's the most racist government ever with Priti Patel and Shiela Burrowes as the Home Secretaries. And I have to tell them, they let in the most immigrants ever. Literally ever. And it does actually stunlock them then, it's quite funny. But barely any leftist really wants to take account of the fact that they basically got everything they wanted for the past 10 years under Tory government, because they want to go on about rhetoric that was supposed to get people like me to vote and frankly actually worked. Hence, Tories to lend a rest.
Oh, I agree with you. That's what we were saying earlier. That's what we need to sort out. We need to get these people who can afford a mortgage onto the housing ladder, because they can afford it because they're paying more rent than they would be in a mortgage. I totally agree with that. The ones that aren't working, there's a lot of people, these people who aren't working in this country. We've got to motivate them.
But there's far more people who are working who can't afford anything.
I agree, and it's not great.
I mean, ultimately, I'm with the guy, but it is unfortunate that the only way we can get them to afford houses is effectively through the bank of mum and dad, or by saving an absolute shed load. I mean, I saved absolutely loads over COVID for obvious reasons. But again, no one wants to talk about the absolute obvious demand side problem that there is in Britain that's absolutely not helping this, which is immigration. Never comes up in housing because people have denied economic reality for so long and socialists don't believe in it. It's crazy.
It's not great. But if you penalise the people who are going to give them the jobs, guess what happens? The jobs disappear.
And yet, we're literally seeing that happening. It's not just anecdotes anymore. We keep seeing it in the statistics as well. Britain hasn't stagnated, it's now contracting, and there's more unemployment.
How soon do you think you'll leave?
ASAP.
Really?
Yes.
We can't afford to stay in the sector, because when ultimately anything that we make on the rent, most of it goes back into the properties because of all the assessments and various other things, legal stuff. It's expensive to be a landlord.
And the left-wing audience it will be music to their ears, but they won't, because absolutely no leftist can look beyond first-order effects. They won't realise that all this really means is lower quality landlords not keeping in line with the bureaucracy, or the house being sold to someone who can afford it, which is not the people who are renting. It's not going to go the way they think, because second-order effects on housing are crazy. Rent controls, great example. You control rent, there's less housing for people. Happens every time. Want an example? Argentina. They got rid of rent controls, rent actually went down 40%, and homelessness has taken a massive hit. It's an absolute success story, but none of these people care.
We had one property that became vacant and we wanted to modernise it. Planning permissions, building control, impossible.
Really?
So
Yeah,
we sold
we
it.
sold it.
Wow.
So it's now not on the market. It's just sitting there under somebody else's wing as an empty property.
Yeah, and that's probably going to happen. We actually have a surprisingly low amount of empty dwellings in Britain. I think we actually have one of the lowest rates in Europe. So on the front of everyone saying it's a problem with vacant dwellings, which, you know, can be a problem, it was less of a problem in Britain, but that's now probably going to be a growing problem because of how difficult it is to build now.
I think that people like us, landlords like us, will find the new bill challenging. I think the big companies that own hundreds, if not thousands of properties, they have their own in-house teams. And I think, I mean, obviously they'll manage, they'll get on with it, and I expect that they'll scoop up all of the properties that will come on the market for sale.
Literally, this happens every time. It's absolutely been something that I have been pushing for ages. All government regulation does is create monopolies. That's all it does. That's why every big tech company is pushing for regulations. It's why they push for minimum wage. It's why they push for higher taxes. It's why a lot of people are pushing for a wealth tax like Dale Vince. It's because they want to be the only rich people left. It's not out of compassion or anything like that. They are using you. You are their useful idiots. And yet this is exactly what is going to happen. The small landlords, who everyone actually quite likes, I have friends who own property and rent it out and haven't actually raised the rent since COVID. That's not going to exist in a world where the bureaucracy is ever expanding and the left keeps getting what it wants, because at the end of the day, the left do not understand a damn thing and need to be kicked out of politics for good. Via electoral means, obviously. Anyway, I did notice that there were barely any questions actually about the wealth tax, but I suppose I covered it anyway, and I got my love for landlords out, because as I say, I've only had good experiences. I know people that haven't, and I understand that, and landlords that are taking advantage obviously should be punished. No problem with that, but I'm not assuming that anyone interviewed in this particular video is a bad landlord. Right, with that is everything I had for you for now, because tonight we have Laughing at the Guardian with some women at 8 PM on this channel, so do come along and watch that. Next Tuesday we have Tosh Talks. Don't know what the topic is going to be, but I do need to make the poll. Hollow Knight next Thursday as well, of course. Videos out as and when I can make them. If you enjoy what I do on the channel, do subscribe, do leave a like, do leave a comment. Free and easy ways to help me out. And of course, if you can spare a little bit of change, I would much appreciate if you could become a channel member, or also leave a super chat or super thanks on any stream or video I do. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.